lot of guys make that mistake of being too nice.
They do.
I think a lot of young guys try to be so sensitive. I think women, they don't want pain, but they like someone who can be a little tough. It shows like there's some dimension to the person. Also, being too nice reveals your insecurities. We all know that a person who feels insecure is trying really hard to please the other person.
Right.
So the sense that you're not so insecure, that you're confident, means that you can step back and give them those little bites of pain every now and then.
Niceness is okay, is a good quality if it's under control, if you understand it and if you use it and you know how to use it strategically, and maybe it's a part of your personality and it's authentic, but it doesn't govern you. You are in control of it. And what happens is, if you're the pleasing type, which is your whole strategy in life is pleasing other people, getting them to like you, which is, a quality that a lot of people have, men and women, right? It doesn't come from a place of security. It comes from a place of deep, deep insecurity. You don't understand really who you are. And so you can't control it. And so you're always trying to please people. And when we can smell people's insecurities. And when it comes to like seduction between men and women have a sixth sense of they can smell an insecure man. And it's very much a turn-off. It's very anti-seductive. Don't judge people as far as who you're going to let into your life. Don't be deceived by the appearances. Don't judge people based on their intelligence, on their charm, on whether they're good or bad, etc. Judge them on their character, whether they have a weak or a strong character. A weak character is somebody who cannot take criticism. That is probably the number one characteristic. The worst trait, I think, in people, and a definite trait of negativity, is somebody who can't take any kind of criticism. They're so defensive. So that means they can get away with anything. They can say anything they want. There's just like a wall, a shell around them. A strong character is a person who can take criticism, who can work with other people, who can deal with stressful situations, who can handle responsibility. And if there's something goes wrong, they take I am to blame for it. They don't look at other people. There's somebody you can rely on. You lean on them, and there's something there to lean on. You can rely on them in situations. Is an incredibly useful and powerful trait to me that reveals strong character. People give off a lot of information by their body language, by their looks, by their tone of voice. And enviers often can be unmasked by their micro expressions. So I have an example here of a way to test whether you're dealing with an envier. Tell them some good news about yourself. You'll see a flash of disappointment in their eyes. It'll only last like half a second, and they'll quickly cover it over. Or if you say something bad that has happened to you, you'll see a slight smile that crosses their face. So it's a classic case of envy, where a person who is envious of you becomes your friend. And they make a point of being your friend. They're very friendly. They love you. Yes. They want to help you. Yes, they want to assist you. Wow, this is great. Because we never get enough of that in life. And then 6 months down the road, they start turning against you, start doing things that completely confuse you. Now, probably in your first encounters, you could have detected something about them already. But people can be tricky. With you, I would kind of sense a complete sincerity, and I would let down my guard. But there are other people that you have to be a little bit wary of. It doesn't mean that you've cut off contact, but you have a little bit of distance. And the moment you see behavior that kind of contradicts that initial impression, and maybe you don't become friends, you don't get involved with them. Yeah. Because getting involved with a person like that is going to cost you a lot in the end. Imagine that you had a realistic attitude and you could see through these people. You could catch, before you get involved with them, signs of that they might be one of these types. Another thing that's incredibly liberating, the world that you live in, there's a zeitgeist, there's a spirit of the times, there are trends, there's things that are going on right now in your career, in the world at large. And we're fed with so much bullshit in the media. We have no idea what's really going on. The ability to see this is where the world is headed. This is where business will be in 2 years. This is where things are going to be. These are the trends. The power. So the power to see inside yourself, the power inside to see other people, to see the world. You know, you're Superman if you can do that. If you can have a degree of that, the world is at your feet, basically. So, you know, I don't think there's any counter argument to that, where you don't want that kind of realism. And it's not this ugly thing. It's incredibly sexy because it's incredibly powerful, right? So we've now come to the point, you and I, we agree that that's what you want. the person out there is going, yeah, I want that as well. Okay, Robert, that's fine. How do I get there? Aha. Well, you have to be patient. You have to know it's a process. You can't get ahead of yourself. You can't get ahead of your skis. It's going to take day by day by day by day. You have to build it up. You're working against your own nature. You're working against the times. So be patient, be compassionate with yourself, and learn to take these baby steps. And in the book, Daily Laws, I have a lot of different ways of attacking that. The main way of attacking it is learning the ability, as we talked about earlier, to be able to detach yourself from the immediate events going on and to be able to look at yourself with a degree of dispassion and say, this is what I really did, what really happened here. So just a simple example, something kind of doesn't go the way you want it to, which will happen almost every day or every week, with your children, with your spouse, with your boss, wherever. Okay. What is your normal reaction? Every single human, including myself, blame that person. They're not caring. They're not empathetic. They're an asshole. They're narcissistic, blah, blah, blah. Stop it. Stop it right now. Don't do that again. Step back and say, what did I do? Okay? If that person is toxic, why am I involved with them? There's something wrong about me. If that person got reactive and resentful and they had a bad tone of voice, something that I said, maybe there was something in me that was projecting kind of negativity. Maybe my own mood was kind of creating this atmosphere that made them react that way. Look at yourself instead of blaming other people. These are parts of the process. There are many others, but yeah.
Dude, that is so huge. People always, so I have a saying that I like that most people fucking hate, which is everything is my fault. And
I love it.
It's so useful. So fault is a word that gives people, I don't know, emotional distress or something. And so they don't like when I use that phrase. But what I like to remind myself is that if I did something different, I could get a different outcome.
Right.
And that's so powerful to me, to not, by blaming somebody else, by making it their fault, I give away all my power and there's nothing I can do about it. And now I'm sort of a victim of circumstance. But man, when you take 100% ownership and you look at your life and say, my life is an exact reflection of choices that I've made.
Yeah.
Now, if I want it to be different, then I just need only make different choices.
Completely. And one of the things that's like that is if something went wrong, maybe, and I'm to blame, just accept it. Just accept the fact that it happened. Don't try to change it, but just say that this has happened and I'm not going to fight it. And it's just my fate in life. It's okay. Right? So the ability to accept things is also taking ownership of them. So if something bad happens and you can't really control it, because let's be honest, there are times that you can't control things. They're just going to happen. Who predicted a pandemic? You can't control that, right? So your first reaction is to get all pissy and go, damn it, why did it happen? Fuck, I'm a victim, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, that's just going to make you more depressed, more inward, more harder to act in the world. Whereas if you say, okay, I can't control the pandemic. It's a terrible thing, but I'm going to roll with the punches. I'm going to accept the way things are. I'm not going to fight it. This is the way the world is. What can I get out of it? What kind of benefit? Well, maybe I can reassess my career. Maybe before the pandemic happened, I was just headed in this path and I was kind of blind. Maybe I'm not really happy with what I am. I'm not happy with my relationships, with my career. Maybe I need to reassess it. Maybe it's time for me to be alone and read books and study and learn new skills, etc. So the ability to accept things that you can't change and to see some benefit from them is also part of that.
I want to go back to emotions. So we've talked about how emotions are incredibly powerful. I don't think you use this example in the book, but it was certainly along these lines that if you damage the region of somebody's brain that deals with the emotional centers, they can't make decisions, which is absolutely just insane to me.
Yeah.
And you also have a quote in the book, though, that I wrote down that I would like to share with people now. And for clarity's sake, I actually agree with both sides of this. So you've got the side that you talked about where if you damage the emotional centers of somebody's brain, they can't make a decision. And then you also had a quote, and I don't know why the app has crashed that I have the quote in. I can paraphrase it if I can't get this out. Here we go. I think I can get it now. Nope, it's not opening. So the paraphrase of the quote is that emotions are essentially a disease looking for a remedy. And I was like, yes, you can't just believe your emotions, or maybe that's not the right way to think about it, but you can't just take them on board. And because I have this feeling, I'm going to act on it, or it represents truth.
Right.
Help people understand. First, give us that. Like, what do you mean? How is it possible that my emotions aren't necessarily useful or true? And then we'll balance it with the idea of how important emotions actually are.
Well, in a Japanese Zen way, your emotions are truth because you are feeling the way you're feeling. Okay, so that's real, right? But it could stem from a very false source as well. Okay, so let's just go back to that example that I gave earlier of the young boy who felt abandoned by his mother, right? And his whole pattern in his life is to be the one that's doing the abandoning, so he's not abandoning himself. So in the moment that he's with this woman within this relationship that's been going on, he's starting to feel something's wrong with her. She's bad. She's not right for me. She's gonna, I better leave this relationship, right? He's not reacting on what she's doing. His emotions are not coming from what she could be perfectly fine. She could be totally loving. He's projecting onto her his own emotions. What he feels is genuine. He genuinely feels that something is wrong, but it doesn't come from the truth itself. It comes from some deeper, much deeper pain. So your emotions, you feeling them, but the source of them, you have no idea what the source is, right? So, you explode at somebody in your office tomorrow because of something. And then you don't realize that in the morning you were already put in a bad mood by something that somebody else said. And that kind of made you prone to like exploding later on in the day. You are seeing that other person that triggered you, but you're not seeing what happened earlier in the day that set the tone for it, that planted the seed for you being triggered, right? So you don't have access to the source of what's really causing your emotions. Now, I'll be honest, you're never going to get true access to the actual source of it because there's something buried very deep inside. Who knows where it came from? Who knows how young you were? Who knows really the unconscious processes that were going on? Okay, so you're never going to get at the core, the real truth, but you can get closer to it. You can not react in the moment. You can say, if you're this young man who's trapped in this pattern, it's a very difficult thing to go, but is it true that she's actually being like that? If I actually step back and analyzed her words, they're totally neutral. She's not being mean or vicious. She's not about to leave me, right? Or she's not betraying me in any way. It's totally neutral, right? And I often go through that process. I've been in a relationship for a long time where I get a little bit upset and angry and I'm blaming her and blah, blah, blah. And I have to go back, like, it takes a couple hours for the microwave to kind of cool down, right? And you go, no way, man. Why does she feel the way she's feeling? Well, it probably comes from me, but I'm totally projecting onto her, right? So just the idea that you're projecting your emotions onto people, just the idea that you're reacting to something that's an illusion, it's a mirage, is liberating enough because it's going to prevent you from doing stupid things. How many times I've had this problem, do you get angry and you send that angry email voicing all of your upset and displeasure, and then 2 hours later you go, shit, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't revealed my vulnerability. I wish I had, I overreacted, right? So the ability to write that email and then put it in the draft folder and never send it. And, I have this thing in my own computer where in my email, that draft folder is getting larger and larger. It's got 12, it's got 20, it's got 80 things in it. That shows me 80 times I have put that thing into the draft folder and I have a degree of control. So,
yeah, the idea that they're one, that you don't have full access to everything that led you to react the way that you did. And two, that to some extent it's an illusion. So you call it attitude, I call it frame of reference. I've given my entire professional life to the idea that frame of reference may be the single most important thing in the determining the outcome of your life. So looking at right now in much of the developed world, your zip code is the number one predictor of your future success. So were it your IQ, I could understand that. But the fact that it just is where you happen to grow up, that's really, really distressing to me. And so having worked in the inner cities a lot and seen up close what the problem is, you encounter people with incredible intellect, but as you watch them process the data, they're processing it through a filter. And that filter is what you call attitude. And when it encounters an attitude that isn't helpful, you get an outcome that's like a funhouse mirror. And you're like, what? The way that you're looking at this doesn't make sense in the following way. You have a goal, and the way you're thinking about things, either your goal makes no sense, it won't optimize for fulfillment or joy, or you have a goal that makes sense, and the way that you're parsing the data does not lead you to take actions that will actually move you towards that goal.
Right.
And so it becomes this really distressing question of, okay, somebody gets to adulthood, they have an attitude or a frame of reference that isn't helping them accurately, it isn't helping them process data in a way that will move them towards a useful goal. That's the cleanest, most truthful way to say it. So then the question becomes, what can you do to begin reformulating that attitude, that frame of reference, in order to get you where you want to go? Do you think at all about what is the atomized thing that makes up the attitude? For me, it's beliefs. Your frame of reference is a reflection of, I'll call it roughly 25 beliefs that you have. Get those beliefs right, you're A-okay. Get those beliefs wrong, and you've got a real problem. But the atomized thing for me is a belief. What's the atomized version of an attitude for you?
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the belief part, but I'm trying to.
Do you want me to explain it? Do you want me to explain it?
Yeah.
All right. So the most important one, so I've actually written down the 25 that I think make this up, but there's one that's really important. It's what I call the only belief that matters, which is that, in fact, you talk about this in your book. Mastery is essentially about this idea that if you put time and energy into getting good at something, you will actually get good at it.
Right.
And that thing has utility in the real world. Now, if you believe that, then you'll pick up the guitar and you'll start practicing.
Right.
You'll sit down at the typewriter and you'll start writing.
Right.
If you don't believe it, it wouldn't make sense to
Right.
pick up a guitar. You're either good at it from birth or you're not. And so why would you bother?
Right.
That one belief will bifurcate your entire life, because you're either going to lean into just the things you think you're already naturally gifted at, and your
Right.
life will be limited by whatever that is, or you will spend a massive amount of time and energy gaining mastery.
Right.
And those two, same person, but those are wildly divergent outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I don't know, the atomizing, I think I might just basically agree with you. I would maybe say the stories that we tell ourselves, which comes down to the same thing. Because I've discovered in my meditation that the way the brain works is it's continually telling us stories about the world, about ourselves, about the way people are. And I don't mean stories it's literally what I'm saying. It's like constructed like a story. It has a narrative arc to it, right? This is what happened to me. And the story is constructed, and this is the result. And what the story I'm telling myself might not be the correct story at all, right? So being able to understand what really happened, what is actually the story that occurred there, is extremely important. And so you're hitting on the bedrock, which is extremely fundamental, which is, do you believe that you're capable of change? Do you believe that good things happen when you go through a process of learning and taking steps? Do you believe, going back to your belief, that you can actually get out of your patterns? Because you can be fooling yourself. You can be bullshitting. You can be saying, yeah, I kind of do. But deep down inside, you don't really want to do it because, believe it or not, your bad patterns give you a degree of comfort, right? It's something that you know. And to get out of them, you're suddenly thrust into the unknown. And that could be very frightening. So you could be holding on to these bad patterns. So the belief that I can change, I can actually do something different in my life. I can actually recreate myself. I can actually learn things. I can actually rewire my brain, because the brain is incredibly plastic. Even at the age of 40, 50, you can change your career. You can learn new skills. You know, I've reached 60. I'm constantly learning as well. The brain is insanely plastic. Do you believe that? Do you believe that you have the possibility to change yourself, to alter your patterns? That's probably the single most important thing right there. And to get people to believe that, as I said, there's two levels. There's the people who will shake their head, yeah, they'll read mastery, but it won't mean anything to them because they're afraid of the change. They're comfortable with a degree of failure, I hate to say, because if you don't try things, you never have to deal with the responsibility, the pain of failure, right? So you don't really want to change deep down inside. You don't really believe in Tom's number one bedrock belief, right? You're kind of fooling yourself. So it's not a fairy tale. It's not a bunch of a myth that we're creating. It's true that you have the power. The brain, if you just understood this one thing, that the brain is like a landscape. It's like a landscape out in the world that you see where things can be lush and tropical, or they can be completely arid and dead. You create that landscape yourself. You create the brain that you have by the degree of how you're open to experience, by the degree of how much you learn, by the degree of how many different sources of information you take in. You can create this incredibly alive brain that's very creative, imaginative, and how much more fun will your life be if you're open and you let things come in and new ideas come in. So it's up to you. You're the one that's creating your misery. It's creating your patterns. And it comes down to that bedrock one belief that you just mentioned. We consider ourselves human. Obviously, we're human beings, but I don't buy that definition. I think that we're actually animals, that we have an animal nature, and that we have to become human. And we become human by overcoming some of these deep-rooted animal forces within us. These forces within us that we can't control, such as the fact that we can't control our own emotions, our own anger, our own frustration, or we feel envy, or we're caught up in the emotions of other people. I call those forces primal forces, human nature, and I have 18 of them. And they can create sort of negative patterns of behavior, the dark side of what we see in the news, etc. And we all have them ingrained in us, because with the way we evolved millions of years ago served a very definite purpose for our survival as a species. But the savannas of East Africa is not the offices in Silicon Valley or 21st century America. The world isn't the same. We are not built to adapt to this new technological environment we're in. We still have that lizard brain, those animal parts of our nature. So my book is designed to confront you with human nature so you can begin to overcome it. So for instance, law number 1 is about how we're basically irrational creatures. We think that we're rational, but really our emotions govern us. We feel something before we ever have an idea or think it. We have to become rational through this process that I lay out in my book. So I don't mean to say that we're negative, because humans are obviously incredible. Look at what we've created. It's outrageous if you think about who we were millions of years ago and where we are now. We're obviously capable of incredible achievements. We're also the most brilliant social animal on the planet. We're capable of cooperating and working on teams to a level that no other animal has ever reached. So there's obviously another side to the story. But to become greater, to become truly human, we have to overcome these forces that I lay out in the book.
What are some of the other primitive forces that are driving us, especially ones that people might not be aware of?
Well, I think we're kind of aware of it, but we don't see it in the same light. So for instance, we are built to constantly compare ourselves to other people. We're always thinking of what the other person has and how we are in relation to them. Are we getting as much attention as that other person? It started off when we were children. Are we getting more attention than our siblings from our parents? So we're continually comparing ourselves in rank, in power, in status
to the people around us. And this is deep force within us, and it's constant every day, every moment. You don't realize it, but you're going through that. And social media, it completely exacerbates this tendency in human nature. And it's the source of envy, which I have a whole chapter on in my book. So that's one force that I talk about, and I try and show the roots of that, in our evolution. Another is the contagiousness of emotions, which is extremely powerful. We tend to think of ourselves as autonomous human beings, that we're independent, that I feel affection or anger or frustration on my own. We don't realize how deeply we are affected by the emotions of the people in a group. This is the viral effects. Emotions are extremely contagious. And I explain in the book there was an evolutionary reason for that. Before the invention of language, we humans had to be able to communicate to one another through just picking up the moods of other people. And if there was a threat to our group or our tribe, the ability to feel fear and anger together bonded us and helped us survive. But that doesn't serve much function in the world today, where viral emotions can be very dangerous and we see a lot of that on social media. So those are two of forces, I could mention, and there are several others.
So you've said that you often write from a place of anger.
I do.
What was the anger that was driving this book?
Well, I tell you, I just think I'm really worried about people nowadays. So in Mastery, my worry was people no longer knew how to build things, no longer understood the process for becoming great and excelling at some craft or field. But now my worry is that people are so immersed in their smartphones and their technology that they don't understand people. They're not observing people. And this has been documented in studies that young people, for instance, levels of self-absorption and narcissism have been growing steadily since the 1970s. We are the preeminent social animal on the planet. Our survival depends on how we relate to other people, whether we understand them on some level. And I find a lot of people are increasingly in the world are really bad at observing just basic elements in human psychology. The position I'm in now, I'm a consultant to a lot of very powerful, famous people. I'm not going to mention any names, but people fly me out to consult with CEOs, political people who are very powerful, and even in other countries. And the number one problem I find that they have is an inability to understand the people they're dealing with. They hire the wrong partners. They hire the worst assistants who end up ruining their lives. These are people who are technically brilliant. They understand their field. They understand marketing, etc. But they don't understand basics about the people around them. And they make terrible hires, or they marry absolutely the wrong person for them in their lives. Their emotions, or their personal relationship bring them down. So this is like our Achilles heel, and I think it's gotten worse in the world today. So my anger was that people are so focused on technology, but that we need to focus much more on human nature, on understanding people. That's the primary skill that you need in life.
I found it really interesting. So I'm sort of I get a little mischaracterized as the blank slate guy. And admittedly, I do want to believe that we're blank slates, but I don't believe that. I don't think that we are blank slates. And I think that there is a certain amount of human nature that's really baked into things. One thing that I thought was pretty funny in your book was like the biggest part of human nature is that we deny that there is human nature. I thought that was wonderfully ironic and terrifyingly true. And I want to know, like, how much of this is stuff where we tease out, because you said the purpose of the book is to give you a sense of who you are so that you can change who you are. But without that self-awareness, without going through the process of learning this stuff, you're just never going to be able to make that change.
Right.
So, okay, operating from the thesis that your book is designed to give me that level of self-awareness, as I go through the process of trying to tease out who I really am, which is a fascinating journey that your book takes people on if they're willing to acknowledge when they see themselves. How much of this is truly like just you were born that way, and how much of this is early childhood development?
Well, I have a chapter on character, which is an extremely important chapter. And what I'm trying to get at in there is that there is something deeply ingrained in each individual person, a particular individual nature that we all have, and that causes us to go into compulsive patterns of behavior. I have this problem myself. I notice each time I write a book, I'm telling myself, I'm going to make this book short. I'm not going to ruin my health. I'm not going to do so much research. And every goddamn time I still go through the same process. I can't break this pattern. Okay? And everybody has them. Where does it come from? Some of it comes from our DNA, from our genetics, things we can't control that we've inherited from our parents. Some of it comes from our early attachments. And some of it comes as we get older and we interact with teachers and mentors and various people who create a certain way we view ourselves. If people keep telling us that we're not really worthy, that we're not good students, we internalize that and we end up becoming like that. So it's a mix of things. You know, each person has a mix of these qualities, and you have to kind of untangle the various strands. And you're right, what I'm saying is you're a mystery to yourself. You don't know who you are. You have patterns of behavior and you're not even understanding that. You don't know why you're angry. You think you're angry because that person said something mean to you or did something wrong. But in fact, your anger probably stems from things from deep, deep within, from your childhood. And you're not reacting to that person, but to actually your parents and what they didn't give you. You know, the origin of wisdom, according to the Greeks, was know thyself, right? And I believe that very firmly, that knowledge about who you are is an end in itself and will help you in so many ways become that human being that I think we all have the potential to become.
So talk to me about self-awareness and how it impacts biases.
Well, you have to see, my books, I try to be as practical as possible. I don't want to get academic. I want you to be able to actually use this knowledge. So I'm a great believer in baby steps, in learning how to do things on a daily basis. So normally when we feel an emotion or we have an idea, we don't examine it. We just assume that's you know, it's just natural. We came up with that on our own. I want you every single day to be examining yourself and to look at yourself. Why do I have that idea? Why am I feeling this sudden emotion? And it's not easy. It can take time and it can take a degree of introspection that you're not comfortable with. But if you begin to look at yourself and question, why do I feel this way? And examine it and look at perhaps other sources of it, then you can begin this process of understanding, instead of just simply accepting that you feel or have this certain idea. So when I write the book on human nature, I admit that I have a negative bias towards human nature. I tend to see the dark side in people. I tend to see their manipulative side, what they're trying to hide. That was the source for the 48 Laws of Power. That was the anger I felt then, that people weren't being honest about how manipulative they can be. So I recognize that I have this bias. I recognize that that's who I am. Instead of thinking that, well, I'm just brilliant and my ideas are always correct, I question it, and I question, is my negative bias towards human nature, is that reality, or is it just me? And maybe it's just me because of the way my parents are. You know, my parents were kind of anxious and worried about a lot of things, and I internalized that, and maybe that gave me my negative view on people. So I question it, and I say, maybe it's not real. Maybe I need to read books that tell me the other side of the story. And there are plenty of books, you know, that say that humans are great. So question yourself. Stop assuming that everything you do is so brilliant and smart and right. And imagine that maybe your ideas don't come from yourself. Maybe you're feeling some political anger or whatever comes from the fact that you're just assuming it from other people. You're following things on Facebook and you're getting swept up in some viral emotion. You want to think that you're completely independent and autonomous, but maybe you're not as independent as you think.
So how do you want people to use your book as a tool as they go through? What exercises do you want them to do? Because I think some of a lack of self-awareness is not just I don't want to do the work, the introspection. It's a not understanding the process of what introspection is.
Well, some of it also is denial. Some of it also is a block that people have to look at themselves, because it is a little bit a confrontation with reality. But as far as the process is concerned, It's a daily thing. So first of all, the first and most important thing that you have to do is to come to admit, it's almost like an AA thing, that you have a problem. If you go through life thinking you don't have a problem, that you know who you are, that your relationships with people are fine, that everything is hunky-dory, then you're never going to be able to even begin to go into the process. So admit you have a problem. Admit you don't understand the people you deal with. Even your spouse or your children, they're mysteries to you. You don't really know what they're thinking. So admit that first. When you admit that, now you're motivated to try and learn. There are little steps you can take. I won't go through all of them. But the first thing is, if you take your wife or your husband, if you say to yourself, I don't really understand them. I think I do. But a lot of the times when you think you understand them, you're just simply projecting onto them your own emotions. Step back and say, today, I'm going to observe her, let's just say from my point of view, in a different way than I normally do. And I'm going to look at her nonverbal communication because I'm a big believer in nonverbals. And today, I'm going to glean one truth about my wife or spouse or partner that I had never noticed before. And I'm going to try and see, perhaps get to the point where I can begin to understand her perspective. So if, for instance, there's an argument or a disagreement, here's another instance where you step back and you go, stop being so self-righteous and maybe try and take the step of understanding her point of view. So, so these are sort of baby steps that you take in life. You can use this in your office where you think you know your colleagues, but you don't know them, and they might be having thoughts about you that aren't very pleasant, that you don't want to confront. Step back and start observing them. And I have many, many examples in the book about lessons on how you can start observing people, observing their body language, seeing the subtext behind their words, seeing their patterns of behavior. For instance, you'll notice sometimes, we all go through this, that when we see our boss, we get a kind of body language and a nervousness it's unusual. But when we see somebody else, like a friend, suddenly our face lights up and we're much more relaxed and happy. All people are like that. So you want to see how somebody reacts to you when you meet them, when you come up to them, and how they react to other people. And notice that there's a great difference when they see you and suddenly they're very nervous around you, or they're very excited. That will tell you a lot about yourself and about them. You're not being observant. You mentioned Milton Erickson before we were talking about how incredibly observant he was. What he was fascinated with was how incredibly unobservant people are.
Let's go deeper into Milton Erickson, who is a shared fascination for you and I
love
and
Milton.
Seeing him in your book, was very excited, and you give like this blow-by-blow account of how he comes to what is really almost a superpower. His ability to read nonverbal communication is beyond powerful, but the way that you tell the story, it makes it sort of self-evident how he develops that. Walk us through, what happened when he got struck with polio, how he leveraged that, what some of those realizations were, and then how we can all train ourselves. And if you can touch on like what he learned about the word no. Like, I found that really interesting.
Yeah. Well, Milton Erickson is an amazing figure. He's the person who created basically hypnotherapy and was the main inspiration behind NLP. And when he was about 18 years old, he suddenly got polio. And as his polio spread, his entire body was paralyzed. Even the only thing that wasn't was his eyeballs. He could move, he could look at people, he had some ability to move his eyes a little bit. And so I can imagine myself, I have a very active mind. Imagine you're paralyzed in bed, you can't read, you can't watch anything, no television, no entertainment. People can read you stories, basically. But how incredibly bored you'll become and how frustrating, and you can't do anything for yourself. You'd go crazy. So what Milton Erickson did, as he was in that state and he was living in his house and people were visiting him, is he decided he would observe people on a much higher level. Now he couldn't say anything, he couldn't communicate because his mouth was paralyzed as well. So all he could do was observe, and observe people closer and closer. And so he noticed
that as he progressed in that, there's this second language that people speak, and this language is nonverbal. It is in gestures, it is in tone of voice, it is in just your body posture. And slowly, over months and years of being paralyzed in this position, he literally mastered this second language. He could tell from the way his sister moved her hair like that or moved her head that she was feeling some resentment towards her other sister. He noticed, as you said, that there were like 5 different forms of no, that someone could say no, I don't want that apple when they were offered to it, but they really meant, yeah, I really do want that apple. And so he noticed that there were all these different variations of no, depending on the tone of voice. He could hear people in another room talking about him, and through that, the tone of their voice, he could understand what they were really trying to say about him and the subtext behind the words that people have. And so as people talk and they use words to conceal what they're thinking, their bodies reveal what they're actually thinking behind the words through their nervousness, their tone of voice, their eyes. The eyes and the mouth tell you incredible amounts of information. Milton Erickson mastered this language, and as he got older, he used this in his therapy, where he would have patients enter his room. He became a psychoanalyst. And he deliberately placed his desk at one end of the corner so they would have to walk into the room. And he could understand from the way they walked and their gait, whether they were nervous, whether they were excited, whether they wanted to change their lives or not. He was so brilliant at it that people later in life, people thought he was psychic. He could literally read your thoughts. It was unbelievable. So the point of this story was that humans have this ability to master this second language. Put yourself in the position of our earliest ancestors. I mentioned this earlier. They don't have language, yet their survival depends on getting along with the group and knowing, like, you're hunting and where is that leopard, what's going on. But you can't say anything, you don't have language yet. So your ability to pick up fear in the eyes of a fellow group member or to pick up excitement, your survival depended on it. So I maintain that our ancestors were virtually psychic in their ability to attune themselves to the nonverbal communication that people are constantly emitting. So the idea in this book is we humans are constantly emitting information about our real emotions. It comes out non-verbally. And you're not picking up these signals. You're so focused on people's words that you're missing this other reality, which is so incredibly eloquent. And I try and instruct you in the book about how you can become a superior observer of this.
I find it very, I don't know the right way to frame this other than to say that while I wouldn't wish a stroke on anybody, the fact that you in particular are able to bring back the lessons from that, what are you doing on a daily basis to get those joyful moments despite all the restrictions?
Well, I have to be honest, it's a struggle. You know, some days I'm very successful and I feel very excited and happy. Some days it's like I've got Tourette's syndrome. I'm just walking around going, fuck, 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 fuck. I'm so upset. I'm so frustrated. And so I'm daily having to struggle with myself. And so whenever I feel that level, the frustration is very easy to explain. Imagine that you can't really button your shirt, that your left hand is so weak that it takes you forever to button your shirt. To get dressed in the morning takes like 10, 20 minutes. To like get my vitamins off the shelf is this kind of ordeal. I can't type. So just my hands. So you take for granted, you out there, you take for granted your use of your hands. Brother, I can tell you, the hand, or sister, that hand is a miracle. You have no idea if you lost one of your hands, what a nightmare it would be. Don't take it for granted. The fine little things that your hands can do, because I can't do them anymore. You know, I can't walk in a normal way. I'm always kind of losing my balance. I have to hold on to things, etc. So the frustration is every single day. There's a tenseness Like, am I going to fall? Am I going to drop this? Can I hold on to this? Can I get this done? And it builds up until your body starts getting tense before anything ever happens. So I have to fight that. And I have to feel it before it happens. And I have to go through kind of a mantra of, you are getting better. You're just not aware of it, Robert. It's something you can't see. It's so gradual that it's going to take 3 or 4 more years. Calm down. It's not like this is going to be you forever, et cetera, et cetera. Other times I don't believe my mantra and I get upset. So it is a daily struggle. And I can go through weeks where the struggle seems great and I'm fine. And then suddenly I'll fall through this hole where I'm just like, damn it. You know, I see people walking by on the street taking a hike. Just 3 years ago, that was who I was. It's not who I am now. I'm like a different person. I want to cry, you know? I can't do the things that gave me pleasure. So sometimes I can't control it when I see things in the world that remind me of my past life. But I had to find compensation. So I can't take a hike up into the beautiful Griffith Park, which is very beautiful with incredible woods up there. It's something I love doing. I can't ride a bicycle, but I found a recumbent bike. It's basically a tricycle, a souped up tricycle, right? But I got the top of the line trike, recumbent trike, right? The best you can get, the fastest, the lightest weight one. And now I'm able to go up these incredible hills like obviously slower than normal people, a normal bike, but I can go up the biggest hill you can imagine. And I do it, and I go up into the hills and the woods, and I'm alone, and it's my therapy. And I know that it's ephemeral, that it only lasts for like half an hour. I suck every second of joy out of that, being in the woods that I can, being alone, and being away from everything. So I've had to find compensations, you know. I had to look at the little things around me and find insanely beautiful things about them. Also, I had the kind of stroke that damages the right side of the brain, which has an effect on you in many ways. But the main thing is, your right side of your brain isn't communicating to the left side. So your left arm, your left leg isn't getting signals from the brain. That's why I can't do the things I can't do. But it saved my cognitive abilities. So if it's hitting my left side, which people have strokes, that's the kind of people that lose the ability to talk.
Oof.
That can't really think straight. I wouldn't be able to write a book. So every day, 3 o'clock, if I'm lucky after I've exercised, I sit down, I'm with my Sublime book, with my notebook. I'm in heaven. Nobody bothering me. Please don't call me. If you call me, I'm going to cuss you. I'm going to get the fuck out of my hair. I'm only working on my book. I am the happiest little baby in the world, you know, because that book is saving me. It's my therapy. So I've found compensations. But, you know, we talked earlier about patience. I'm patient in some sense, you know, to write a book, but I'm also impatient in another sense, right? I'm impatient with my body, with my physical things. I want to be able to do things now. And so I've had to learn a different form, like a meta patience, a whole other level of patience. And it's a work in progress. That's all I can say.
Talk to me about hope. How is it, you know, as you do physical therapy and try things and you make some progress, but not as much as you want, how do you continue to renew your hope?
It's the most hardest thing, and it's the most important thing, I can tell you. Because the moments that I don't feel hope, I'm just kind of ready to give up. You know, I mean, what's the point of this? So I have to continually rekindle it. And it's been a roller coaster ride, because in the beginning, people will say, Robert, you've got to try this. You've got to try hyperbaric chambers. You've got to try this acuoscope that this guy has. You have to try the stem cell research. You have to go this and that. And I get my hopes up. I go, oh, all right, I'll spend thousands of dollars on this new form of therapy. I do it. A little bit of change, but nothing really happens. Then my hope sinks. It's like, I don't know what the expression is, a god that dies every single time this happens is how I explain it. Like, I had this belief in something, and then it got burst. It's very painful. And so People are constantly suggesting new forms of therapy. My hope rises. And I have to be able to control that and know that there is no quick fix on this. The actress Sharon Stone had a stroke very similar to mine
Right.
at a comparable age. And I actually was going to try and contact her. It sounded like we had very similar experiences. She wrote that it took her 7 years
Whoa.
to get back to a normal kind of life. I've done 3 years so far. So I have to tell myself that there are no quick fixes. And she herself did every form of therapy imaginable. And believe me, people are well-meaning, and they come and they say, Robert, you got to try this, you got to try that. I've gone to the point where, like, please don't tell me that anymore. I don't believe in quick fixes. I have to do this day by day by day. I have to retrain my body, So I'm trying a new form of therapy right now. It didn't instantly give me results. It's something very interesting. It's based on Feldenkrais. Fascinating new way.
What is Feldenkrais?
It's a whole different way of looking at your body, and I find it fascinating. It's just not hyper designed for a stroke victim, but I think somebody will someday. It's based on this idea that the body is a whole unit, right? So you can't isolate the parts. The body works as a whole. It's in a complete organic whole. So if you have back pain, it doesn't stem from your back. It stems from your pelvis. It stems from your hamstrings. It stems from how you move your legs. It stems from your neck, the whole body. And we have built-in tensions all over our body. We use muscles that we don't need to use, right? So every time you're about to lift something or do something arduous, or even psychologically do something arduous, the chest muscles tense up as if that will help you somehow get over what you're doing. But you don't need the chest muscles. They're not designed for that. You're using muscles that you don't need that are expending energy. If only the muscles that were necessary to do the job were firing, everything would work so much better. So the Feldenkrais, this is called the Anat Banil method. She was a student of Feldenkrais. There's an ideal of the body that I can sense when I do the lessons, where you're on a whole other level. You're like only using the muscles that are necessary. You're moving with this kind of grace and elegance and efficiency that wasn't existing before. All the bad habits with our necks, our shoulders, and the psychological stuff that they put you through. It's very powerful. It's just not geared specifically for a stroke victim. Then I'm doing another form of therapy. Tom, you have no idea how boring this physical therapy is, right? So when I'm used to exercises that's kind of fun, even lifting weights can be fun because you see your muscles building, right? You feel your heart pounding, swimming, running. It's all kind of fun. This is like little micro movements with your knee, with your leg. It's so boring. So I have to like put music on. I have to watch the ball game. I have to do something to distract myself. So, I mean, I'm going through all the weeds here of my process, but
So what I find interesting about it is just inevitably all of us are going to go through something or have gone through something, and how we deal with that crisis is so telling. And the fact that we were talking before we started rolling, that typing is hard. And so here you have an author and you've taken away one of the ways by which they get that out. And as somebody who's thought, so I'm a late bloomer, and I have this real sense of wanting to make the most of the time that I have.
Late blooming meaning when? How late were you blooming?
The skills stack, right? So I feel like I'm getting better, but like when I think about things that I'm 45 now, and I'm only just now getting confident in certain abilities. Thank you.
It's your secret.
Diet, exercise, sleep, meditation. That really, there's nothing magical. I do not come from great genes. I'm very sad to report. So when I think about the things that are just now beginning to click for me, and I'm like, oh my God, like I see even people on my own team that are 10 years, 15 years ahead of where I was. It's very easy to be jealous that, oh my God, you have this insight, so many years before I did, how much more time will you be able to make use of? But very quickly you realize that's not a fruitful way to approach it. And so This was years ago now, maybe 5 years ago. I did this thing to celebrate, I forget how many subscribers we had on Facebook or YouTube or something. And I went live for 24 hours. So I was on camera for 24 hours without the only breaks I took were to pee.
Wow.
And then 3 days later, I was in England and I gave a speech and I didn't have a microphone. And so for 9 hours, I was essentially yelling to this large crowd. And then I woke up and my voice was weird and it didn't go away. And I felt like I had a lump in my throat. And then like when I would turn my head, I could feel something click and I was like, ooh. So then of course I'm like, is this cancer? Like, what is this? And you start thinking, what would happen if I lost my voice? As a leader, even just in business, forget being on camera, my ability to persuade, to galvanize a team, to get people excited and focused, I have learned to do it all with my voice. And so I started thinking, what would happen if I lost my voice? And it's like, okay, like I would definitely have to mourn. I would have to go through a period where it's like, I'm just going to feel badly for myself for a while. But then it's like, you make use of what you have. But it really made me take stock of, I had taken my ability to speak for granted for, at the time, whatever, 39, 40 years. And now I don't. And now I'm very thoughtful. And so getting the kind of insights of the struggle that you're having, it's very useful.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's inevitable for everyone. You may not go through a stroke, but you're going to deal with some kind of adversity where the physical things that you took for granted are taken away from you. That just happens. It's just the nature of life, and it can occur at any age. So these are skills that you have to develop, but the main thing I try and tell people is, I don't know how powerfully I can implant this in your brain, but do not take for granted what you have right now, because I can tell you I did. I thought I'd be swimming the rest of my life. It was my life. It meant so much to me. Do not take for granted what you have now. When you're doing these activities, feel insane amounts of gratitude that you have a body that can perform these things, because it could be taken away from you tomorrow, right? So that's the number one thing I want to tell people. It's not to get anxious and paranoid and fearful about the future. That's not going to help you at all. You need to have a joyful life, a happy life. So, but look at what you have right now and look at the marvels, the things you don't realize, as I said, what your hands and legs and brain can do. It's absolutely miraculous and awesome. So just look at it that way. And then if these things happen, we are creatures that are able to accommodate ourselves to things. We can be very good at that, right? We find compensations for it. I mean, the other thing, being 45, I was a later bloomer than you, I think. I mean, I didn't start writing the 48 Laws until I was about 36, 37. You were doing things well before that, if I remember.
From a business standpoint, yeah. Your story of late blooming is really extraordinary. Like, it's amazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, until I was 36, I was pretty lost. I wasn't like starting a great business like Quest and all these other things. I was a struggling, depressed, penniless screenwriter in Santa Monica in a one-bedroom apartment, in this kind of rundown apartment building, right? And then suddenly my life changed. So I'm as late a bloomer as you can get. But there's a reason why you bloom late, if you bloom at all, which is it comes at the moment that you're ready for it, right? So people who are 32, 33 that you might be envious of, they're not ready to create what you're able to create now with all of your experience and all the things you've learned with all the businesses you've started, all your entrepreneurial skills, all the people you've interviewed. You have that rich landscape of a brain that we're talking about. That 32-year-old, they may have some more experiences than you had, but they have nowhere near the ability to exploit it like you have now, So
yeah, I like to run the brain in a vat experiment. And that, I find it really useful. And every time I explain this to people, I never see the sort of spark in their eye that I want to see. But for me, this has been really liberating, which anytime I find myself thinking, woe is me or whatever, I say, hold on. Imagine for a second that all of this is just the frame of reference that you need. Literally, you came into existence in this moment. You're a brain in a vat somewhere, and all the trauma, sadnesses, failings, all of that is the context, to your point about emotions, is the emotional context that becomes necessary for you to make decisions and move forward.
Right.
So rather than lament it, just like make sure that you're making decisions that propel you forward. And even though I don't believe that, I think my life was lived and it is exactly what I think it is. And the traumas and all of that are all real and they're just a part of me. But there's something about running that thought experiment that allows me to recontextualize the purpose of, whether it's lamenting being a late bloomer or my big lament, which you talk about in the book, just not being as smart as I want to be. Like when I see people that can really process data quickly, I get so jealous to this day that everybody has their thing. That's my thing. And, but realizing that if you look at it from just a slightly different angle, all of a sudden it's like, all right, I'm good.
You process data very quickly.
You think that because you're talking to me about subjects that I've already thought about.
Oh.
If you were talking to me about a subject that's totally new, it certainly startles me every time how long it takes me to really, like, I would never be a debater on national television. I will just tell you that.
Well,
so that does not speak
that's
to
a
my
very
strengths
specialized skill.
that I wish I had.
No, really.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at social gatherings where there'll be this one person I know who has these meetings with the smartest people around. And they're these whippersnappers who are 25, 26, and they're doing what you're doing. They've got all this information, all this snappy stuff, all these anecdotes. Damn, where's that coming from? I'm just not like that animal, right? I'm slow. I'm deliberate. I need to read about, I need to process things. And I go, slowness is a good thing, right? They may be a whippersnapper, but they may be not being able to go into depth about anything. They're on the surfaces. They're kind of regurgitating ideas and beliefs that are kind of on the surface, that they're good at fooling people, but they're not going into the depths. People who go into the depths are slow, are deliberate, take time to think, who are more thoughtful, and are more patient. So I wouldn't want to be that fast, that high-speed processor that they have, because I don't think that's where great things come from.
It's interesting. That's a very good way to think about it. The harder way to think about it, though, is to say, what if they really are just better than me? And now facing that. So the one that I always pose to people is, I want you to imagine that someone you really respect doesn't respect you. That's hard. Now, if you can deal with that, like if I can stare nakedly at my own inadequacies, compare myself to somebody who just objectively is better at something that I want to be good at. So
Yeah.
not even discounting, like, sure, there might be trade-offs, but can I look nakedly at somebody who is truly better than me at something that I want to be great at and still find joy and fulfillment in my life? That to me is like, that's the question. And so I've tried to get myself to a place. You talked earlier, I thought this is so brilliant, that your ego gets knocked down, but you have these mechanisms like a thermostat to reset your sense of self. That to me is the juice. You have to get good at that. And so I used to really get in emotional twists over this stuff, but I have learned some very useful techniques to keep my emotional equilibrium. So I can say that I'm envious of people that have that without diminishing my sense of self or, losing time and energy to worrying about it anymore. I used to. I don't want to paint that this was easy, but that to me is the trick.
Okay, but I still think your process of that they're so much better than me is a bit of an illusion or the reason for being envious. Okay, so you combat your envy, all right? But I'm trying to tell you, I don't think there is a reason for your envy in the first place. So people, they're not as brilliant as you think they are, right? People are good at faking things generally, right? And then maybe they're not as happy as they seem to be. Maybe their life, you're just seeing them on television or with their snappy answers, but they're covering up everything else that's going on underneath, right? You're not seeing the full picture there, right? So there's generally Your envy is always kind of exaggerated because you're beginning from a place of insecurity. You're beginning from a place of inferiority where you're primed to feel envious of people like that. So it's almost starting with you. You're almost projecting onto them their superior qualities. And I find myself doing that. Yes, there are people who are better than me. I certainly know that. There's a writer I deeply admire who passed away recently. He's much more of an academic and intellectual. His name is Roberto Calasso. He was an Italian writer, wrote a lot about ancient Greece. That guy is far more brilliant than I am. He's amazing what he wrote about. I'm in awe of it, and I really mourned his passing. But I think it's important to feel for that, not envy, but just disinterested admiration for people who are superior to you, and to recognize it. I know there are plenty of writers and thinkers who are superior to me, and if they are genuinely that way, they're not bullshitting, my hat's off to them. We need people like that. It reaffirms my faith in humanity when I see someone that I think is vastly superior or great at what they do. I wish I could be like them. Okay, there are other humans on this world, it's not as bad as we think it is, who are absolutely brilliant. And, I feel that way about great scientists as well. I'm kind of a scientist manqué in a way. So,
what's a manqué?
Oh, sorry.
No, I love it. You're teaching me something new.
It's a French word. Manqué means a failed, I wanted to be, a wannabe. I'm a scientist wannabe sort of thing. I missed the boat. It literally means missed. So, I deeply admire it. And if I detect creativity in people, in their work, I'm in awe of it. And there are people who can do creativity that I can't even begin to imagine. That's where I feel awe and genuine admiration. I never feel envy. Believe me, I feel envy all the time, but not for people who are incredibly creative.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a great frame. I love that. Like you, when I meet somebody that blows me away, I love it. Like, I'm stoked. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't want it also for myself, but
Sure.
I'm stoked that it exists in the world. Yeah, that is very exciting when you see what humans are capable of, and then when you take us as a collective. And it's really interesting. So I was interviewed by a guy named Brian Keating yesterday, who wrote a book about I think it's called Into the Impossible, but he talks, his book is about beyond, like, getting rid of the Nobel Prize. I forget the exact title, Brian, forgive me, but he was talking about how the Nobel Prize has, like, caused some of the greatest scientists on planet Earth to commit suicide and, like, all this crazy shit. And I was like, what? And he was like, oh yeah, you get these guys are nominated for a Nobel Prize, but because they never win, it becomes so devastating that they can't live with it. And I'm like, you're nominated for a Nobel Prize, something that, like, 0.00001% of humanity will ever, achieve. But he was like, yeah, it's like a devastating thing for people. And he of course remembered all the people that had won, and I guess you have to sign this book when you win. And so in the book you see, like, Albert Einstein and all these other people. And he said, Feynman was like, well, I'm never going to be an Einstein. Einstein was like, I'm never going to be a Newton. Newton was like, I'm never going to be a Galileo or whatever. Right. It was like, that all of these people were just like, we look at them and like, oh my God, like, that would be insane to hit that level. And each and every one of them had someone that they were like, well, but I'll never be that person. So fascinating.
Well, that's human nature in a nutshell, because I talk about that in the laws of human nature in the chapter about envy, that our brains operate by comparison. That's how it operates on the most basic level. A piece of information comes through our senses, and our brain immediately processes it by comparing it to previous things that we've experienced. So the brain only operates by comparing. So when you create a social animal that has a brain that operates that way and is conscious, obviously they're going to be primed to continually compare themselves to other people, right? So Albert Einstein was comparing himself to Niels Bohr, to other people he had insecurities as well. People who were into quantum mechanics and making these great discoveries. He felt that kind of little wound of envy as well, and it's been written about. So yeah, it's impossible to get over. The most powerful person in the world is going to feel that envy. And in fact, the higher up you go, the more insecure you might tend to become, and you wonder, do I still have it? I'm getting older. A lot of scientists reach their prime when they're 30, 35. Now they're 45 and they're 50, and that Nobel Prize slipped through their hands, even though they're absolutely brilliant. So they're going to be feeling envy. Envy is deeply, deeply human, and nobody wants to talk about it. It's the most common human emotion, and it's the least common topic that we ever discuss.
Except in your books, where you go
Except in
into
my
it
books.
beautifully, which I love. And that's part of the fun of your books is it's all the things that nobody wants to talk about and talked about well and articulately with stories and evidence. I mean, it's really fascinating. And for anybody that wants to, do what we were talking about earlier and develop that self-awareness, just hearing about it talked about so clearly is very helpful.
Oh, well, thank you.
Very helpful. Dude, I love your work. It has been a joy to have you on the show as many times as I have. I cannot wait for the next one.
Yeah, this is my 4th time?
3 or 4, yeah.
One,
and hopefully there will be
two,
5,
this is the
6. That's incredible. All right, my friend, I have a big announcement. My incredible and talented wife, Lisa, is about to launch her new book, Radical Confidence. In it, she has managed to perfectly capture the process of how to go from feeling lost and insecure to taking control of your life and doing amazing things despite feeling fear, sometimes a lot of fear. Now, let me tell you, nobody knows Lisa better than me, but when I read Radical Confidence for the first time and heard her describe what it was like for her to go from having these big, exciting dreams as a kid to then as an adult scheduling her life around the TV shows that she wanted to watch, or how lonely and isolated she felt instead of pursuing her dreams, it was brutal for me. I would never say, though, that it was worth it for her to go through all of that just so that she could write something down that allows others to avoid it. But I will say that at least she was able to capture the strategies that she used to break out of that rut, find her voice, and begin doing incredible things despite her insecurities and fears that she wasn't going to be good enough to achieve great things. So while it hurts me to know the dark place that Lisa went through, I really am excited for people who are going through something similar right now to read this book. Radical Confidence is an instruction manual for how to become the hero of your own life, even when you're scared to death. Look, I know better than just about anybody how easy it is to get off track in life or to just not have yet found your calling. And it's even easier for people to feel so insecure and unprepared that they don't even want to pursue the things that they want. But what Lisa shows people in Radical Confidence is that the radical part is that you can accomplish extraordinary things even when you feel fear. That's what Radical Confidence is. Being afraid and unsure and having a toolkit that allows you to still make massive progress. Pre-order your copy today, because if you act now, you can claim the bonuses that Lisa has created for you at radicalconfidence.com. They're only available if you pre-order, so act now. Then, once you've done that, we'll get back to today's episode. All right, guys, read the book and get ready to be the hero of your own life. Peace out.
When I think about for something to be, for you to say that it's better to, to really self-analyze, it makes me think you have a goal. What is your goal maybe for your life? That might be the right place to start. Like, what to you is a life well lived in the context of you judging, doing the self-reflection and understanding how the way the world works becomes this exceedingly fun thing for you?
Well, I mean, you're asking really good questions, and I'm glad you're pressing me on that. I like that. But it comes down to what you want for yourself, right? So are you somebody that's interested in actually having power in this world? Are you someone that's interested in being successful in your venture, in real?
Define power for me. Most people think it's a dirty word. You've sort of made your life around that.
If you think power is a dirty word, you've got a problem. And usually the people who think power is a dirty word are the people who are the most manipulative and passive-aggressive animals on this planet. Because
that's interesting.
We humans naturally want power. We want a degree of control over our lives. So imagine the scenario where you can't control anything about your children. They just run wild. You can't influence them. You can't control any of the behavior of your spouse that's irritating the fuck out of you. You can't control your colleagues who are plotting all these things. You have and your boss is making you crazy. You have no control. That's a recipe for incredible, not only misery, but depression, for turning into all kinds of health problems, for turning to drugs and alcohol, for going off the deep end by the time you're 40, right? So you want power in your life. Power is, I have goals, I have a fate, I have a destiny in life. I want by the time I'm 40 to reach them. The ability to reach that, to have control over yourself and to a degree of your emotions, not repressing them, but some control, right, will help you realize those goals. That is power. Power isn't like some politician up there, weaving all these Machiavellian things to hurt and destroy people. That's the cliche. You've been watching House of Cards for too long. I know nobody watches that anymore, but whatever the new show is. So that's not power. Power is the ability to guide yourself through a very dangerous world, very competitive world where we're almost all having to kind of work for ourselves, where we don't get much help or cooperation from the world. We're thrown out of the university if we go to college, and here we're in this world where there are no rule books telling us how to navigate it. It's very complicated and very difficult, and you make mistakes that you can suffer for. And power is knowledge, is ideas, is understanding how to navigate a very dangerous world. Okay, so you want that, to get back on track to what I was saying. So you want that, right? You want to be, this is something that I talk about in Mastery, the idea of wasting your potential, of never realizing your goals, of never being able to create that business you wanted to create, or make that film that you think is in you, or start the business that you're starting, Tom. That's what you want in life. And if you don't want that, there's nothing I can say that'll help you, right? I'm starting with the assumption that you want that, and I think most people do want that. Okay, so your rage, you're constantly wasting time on the internet, you're constantly being infected by the emotions of other people, is wiping away day by day, second by second, all of your own power, right? Because what is your power? Your power as you, Tom, is to be able to realize what makes you different, what makes you unique. I don't quite remember the full trajectory of your career, but I remember you early on with the health company that you had started and all this. And then you had a plan. Your plan is to create this kind of empire. I'm not trying to reveal your secrets here, but you had...
I'll reveal away. Okay.
You have this idea of creating a new kind of empire, sort of a new Disney, right? And that comes from something within. I'm assuming that there's something of the child in you that wants that you've wanted that for a while, that it represents something that's unique about you. It's not something that comes from social media or the people around you. That could play a small role, but it's mostly something from within you. It's you, okay? And that's you. What makes you different and unique is your source of power. And the days you spend getting angry about things that have nothing to do with your day-to-day life, they're corroding that uniqueness of you, and they're making you a conforming Pavlovian dog that's just like everybody else out there in the world. If you look at the people who are truly successful and powerful, see them as kind of models or icons to reach, okay? It's not to say that we all have to be incredibly successful to feel fulfilled. I'm not saying that. I know people who are really great carpenters who are great at that, and that's really fulfilling. And I know people who just want to be parents, and that's their life's task, and it's tremendously fulfilling. But the people who are really successful, even at those things, we can say that they're unique, that they're one of a kind, that there's nobody else like them, and that is the source of your power, right? So you want that. If you don't want that, I can't help you. But if you do want that, the time you're wasting getting enraged and being manipulated and feeling all these things and just getting into that lizard part of you is time you're wasting, and your life is a lot shorter than you think it is.
Whew, ending on a big one there. Before we get to mortality, death, all that, which I think is incredibly powerful, I want to talk about the idea of Carl Jung and the shadow side. So no, I don't think there's anybody writing today that speaks as eloquently as you do about the shadow, about the sort of dark energy that we all have inside of us that can be extraordinarily powerful. And I know you well enough to know your beliefs around this are nuanced, but listening to you as you were talking there, it's like, don't get sucked into rage. You're going to be wasting your life. Life is shorter than you think. That is true. But there's also an element of, capture that rage, my friend, leverage that rage, point it at something that makes sense. And this is where it gets incredibly complicated, because if you have a goal and there's something that you want to go after, letting something piss you off can actually be quite powerful. And I talk to my students in Impact Theory University about this idea of having an animus, having something that literally animates you, that you can't live in a world where that thing is true, and holding on to your anger enough to turn it into something usable. So you're not just flailing around, reacting, freaking out, but it's like, hey, this is not okay. I'm going to fan the flames of that. I'm not going to let them burn me to death, but I'm going to fan the flames of that, get angry, and go do something about it. So how do you think about that? As you point out very aptly that the anger can cause you to waste your life, but also it's a tool. How do you help people reconcile that idea?
Well, these are all great. Another great question. Well, I'm thinking back on myself and the anger that propelled me to where I am today, which was largely my experiences in Hollywood. And just to tell that story very briefly, I worked in Hollywood from like the very late 80s into the mid 90s. And I saw a lot of very, very manipulative people, and a lot of hypocrisy, where it was supposedly all about creating great art or making a film, but really it was about power. It was about using people and getting what you wanted out of it, and getting more power than the other person, and getting recognition. And that was the true subtext of what everybody motivated most people in Hollywood. And man, that pissed me off. The hypocrisy of that pissed me off. Okay, now, is that something that comes from, is that just sort of a superficial reaction to me feeling like, because I wasn't successful, was I just simply hurt? Was it more like envy because I wasn't very successful myself in Hollywood, to be honest? Or did it come from something deeper? And in analyzing it, yes, it came from something very deep. Since I was a child, I've always been very, very sensitive to people's hypocrisy, to people pretending to be something that they're not. And I think a lot of children are like that. They have antennae for that. Right? And it really angered me. And then you could ask yourself, well, why?
Why does that anger you?
Because I feel like, it's like people pretending to be something that they're not,
And you just have an inherent value that's a bad thing?
It's not just an inherent value. It's just that we're all flawed creatures. And I must have been aware since I was a child that I am a flawed individual. Robert, I have dark emotions. I can be kind of bitter and aggressive and ambitious and hurtful, right? I knew from very early on of my own flaws. And it really irritated me that people pretended to be something else, that they weren't, they weren't true to themselves. And I could see that in children who were pretending to be the little princess or the prince in their family, like they were perfect, that they were really good. And then I would see the other side when we, for mommy and daddy, they were all perfect. But then when we played, I could see the little nasty little rascal come out, right? I hated that. Okay, we could dig deeper and deeper. Well, why did I hate that? But I think it came from something very real something about me. So my anger at Hollywood wasn't really, I don't deny that there was an element of I didn't get success, so I feel kind of envious, because we all feel that. But I don't think that was the full picture. There was something very real about it. And because I've been feeling it throughout when I was a kid, it was feeling it throughout my 20s. It was the subject of all of the short stories, novels, and plays and screenplays I was trying to write. So it came from a very deep, real place. So when it came time to write my first book, The 48 Laws of Power, beginning in 1996, I had to draw on that anger, And if it had been something that wasn't really me, if it was something that was just a gimmick, I don't think it would have worked. So if your emotions don't come from something that's very profound about who you are, about that dark side, isn't something that's you are, but it's like a gimmick. You're just pretending to be angry, and there are a lot of people who do that, or you're pretending to have some other kind of emotion. We humans, we can smell that. We can sniff out phoniness fairly well.
but I felt it very deeply. And I disguised it in the 48 Laws. I channeled it into a book where you never really knew that it was from Hollywood. I never talked about myself, but you could feel the subtext of some kind of little bit of anger there at people's hypocrisy, right? So I took an emotion that was part of who I am, right? And I used it in very constructive, channeled, productive way, which is what I say about the dark side. So, to get back to the theory behind it, when you were a child, you were what I call you were like a round ball, a ball that had a front side and a dark side that's not visible